Okay, welcome everyone. I see folks are still coming in. Um, we are going to give it maybe just one more minute to let folks sign on. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute. There is interpretation for American Sign Language and for Spanish. So if you're looking for that, you can click that little globe at the bottom of your screen. I'm so glad you are all here today. It's really lovely to be in community, even if it's a virtual space. So I'm grateful for you all for joining us. All right, I am going to ahead and get started. I'll talk a little slowly through my introduction to give people a little bit more time to join. So thank you again for joining us at Nonviolent Peaceforce for this session on strategies for resilience, tools for safety and protection. So I'm Anna Zaros. I'm the interim head of mission for Nonviolent Peaceforce's US program. And across the US, we work side by side with local communities to keep people safe and build lasting peace. And in times where peace can feel farther and farther away from us, two concrete things we can do is be in touch with our own agency to remain safe and also stay in community with each other doing this same work together. So we're really glad you're here today to practice these two concrete steps we can take for ourselves in these times. So before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this session will be recorded. So you'll have these tools afterwards to go back to and practice and share with others who may also need them. There will also be time for questions at the end. So as questions come up for you, please do enter them in. You can find the Q&A section there at the bottom on your bottom screen. You can click that and put a question in, and we'll save those for the end and get to as many as we can. And just one last time, there is interpretation for American Sign Language and English. If you're looking for that, you can click the globe at the bottom of the screen. So I'm now going to turn it over to Kalayan Mendoza, the head of programs for Nonviolent Peaceforce US. For the last 2 decades, Kalayan has worked in solidarity with frontline communities around the world to co-build their capacity to respond to state and non-state actor violence. So I'm deeply grateful for his leadership during this time and his offerings to us tonight. So I turn it over to you, Kalayan.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. And a big thank you to the NP team, of course, but also our interpreters, Cheryl, Vern, and Jake. So today we're going to be going over strategies for resilience, tools for safety and protection. We're with Nonviolent Peaceforce, and Nonviolent Peaceforce is an international humanitarian protection organization. We utilize unarmed civilian protection around the world. Unarmed civilian protection, in essence, is community-led, nonviolent, nonpartisan, relational, independent, and grounded in human rights and international humanitarian law. Today, we'll be going over proactive and responsive tools grounded in unarmed civilian protection. These tools will be supporting you in being safe, whether it's at a protest, at a community event, or in your day-to-day life. NP radically centers the leadership of those most directly impacted by violence. We work alongside communities from South Sudan to South Brooklyn to build peace and safety through nonviolent means. The tools we'll be going over are building a go bag, early warning, early response, the OODA loop, pod mapping, and the holistic check-in. So many of you are probably joining us today wondering, what can I do? Our job today is to provide you with some practical steps that you can take that are both proactive and responsive to the moment. One of the first things I prefer to do when in times of uncertainty is to prepare. And when I'm able to prepare, that means I'm able to support the community as needed. One of the first things I always do is building a go bag. As a person raised in California where earthquakes were a common occurrence, we learned at an early age that having a go bag was really important. Um, in times in times like today, like now, where climate catastrophes are happening all the time, such as the wildfires in LA, um, the um, the both the intense winter and the intense heat waves that are happening all over the world. It's important for us to prepare and knowing that we have the ability to do that. When building a go bag, there are three things that you want to keep in mind. One, that it's portable. Two, that it's personalized. And three, that it's made up of necessary materials or gear. Each person is going to have a different go bag, and we're just going to be providing some guidelines on building your own. So some building blocks for building your go bag. You first want to think about shelter or clothing, and these are all based on the 3 rule. It'll take about 3 minutes. Sorry, excuse me. It takes about 3 hours for you to be exposed to the elements before harm happens to you. It takes about 3 days before you can severely suffer from the effects of dehydration. And it takes 3 weeks for one to um, basically starve to death. So when we're thinking about the building blocks of our go bag, we want to think through shelter or clothing. So choosing shelter or clothing that is going to be weather appropriate, that is portable, and one that meets your specific needs. Next is water. When we think about water, it's one of the heavier aspects of the go bag, but having at least 2 forms of water filtration is really necessary when having a portable system to keep yourself and others safe. I personally have a UV filter that is paired with a life straw. Next is food. Because we can live without food for a longer time, um, I usually have Spam in my go bag. It has about 900 calories per can. I like it whether it's cooked or whether it's cold. So having food that you know will be able to sustain you if you have to leave your home or your place of residence for 72 hours or more. And then lastly, survival necessities. These range from medication, uh, cash, to a passport or identification. Once again, each individual is going to have a personalized go bag, and not all items that I use will be applicable to other people and vice versa. Some good practices with a go bag is you want to put together supplies and gear that'll last you 72 hours. You want to practice using a go bag. If there are folks on here that camp, you probably know exactly how much food or water you need for a weekend of camping, car camping. Uh, I strongly recommend that folks actually try their go bag with everything in it and to see how far you can go before it becomes untenable for you. The more that you can practice, the more you can get your body and mind acclimated to it, the better it will be in the event of an emergency. You want to make sure to place it where you can easily access it. I have mine right at the door. You want to update it every quarter for both the considerations around weather, but also just to make sure that your any medicines or anything in your first aid kit or your food are not expired. And then lastly, it's important to also have a mini version of your go bag, aka a get home bag. This is something that you can put together for yourself and your loved ones or your community, or help them put it together. Basically, what would you need in order to get back from school or from work back home? So after each of these different tools, I'm going to have an assignment for folks. Your assignment tonight is to write up a list of what would be in your personal go bag if you were to have to leave your home for 72 hours. Next, the next tool is called early warning, early response. This is a system, mechanism, and tool that has been utilized by human rights defenders around the world. In Myanmar, we had trained community in Myanmar, the Philippines, South Sudan, and other program sites. We trained and supported the community to come up with their own early warning, early response system. In essence, early warning is knowing about a danger before it happens. These are called threat indicators. So if we can imagine an everyday occurrence, um, if you see dark clouds on the horizon, maybe lightning, maybe you might see a thunderhead, that's an indicator that it could potentially rain. So the harm would be rain. An early response is acting quickly to stay safe when danger is coming. It's a proactive action. So bringing out your umbrella would be an example, a simplified version of an early response. I wanted to share a case study on early warning, early response from a protest organized by the LGBTQ community called Queers versus Adams. Uh, it happened on June 23rd, 2024. The LGBTQ community organizers had reached out to NP to be able to provide support in keeping themselves and the community safe as they enact their fundamental human rights. When working with the community, we moved through and identified the following early warning signs or threat indicators. The first was that the NYPD response to Palestine protests a week prior was extremely heavy-handed, and the protest was going to happen in the same location. So our early response was to create interpositioning and interfacing with the NYPD. We interpositioned by having safety teams on the ground to potentially de-escalate violent situations. We also interface with the NYPD by having police liaisons uh, that would serve as a buffer between the community, the organizers, and the NYPD, where we basically let them know this is how long we're going to be here, this is what the action is going to look like, and this is when we're going to disperse. So by having the implicit trust of the community, we were then able to navigate the process with the NYPD. The next early warning sign was the week prior, there was a heat wave and heat injuries at the AOC and Bernie rally in Harlem the day before. Our early response was setting up a mutual aid distribution where we put a call out to the community for water. And as you can see in the image, we got way more water than we needed, but ensured that everyone at the rally was hydrated, safe, and there were only a few heat-related injuries. The next early warning or threat indicator was that there were credible self-immolation statements and threats made online. Our early response was to come up with safety team protocols that addressed this potential scenario. We worked with organizers to let them know the specific signs. As you can see, I have my hands above my head in an X. This was to indicate that there was this specific threat and that the organizers were to shut down the rally and everyone in the safety team were to escort people out of the location. And then the last threat indicator was there has been prior to the rally, there was a spike in anti-trans sentiment online. Our early response was to train people, including our safety team, on protective presence and protective accompaniment. In essence, by being present, our safety team was able to de-escalate violence before it happened. And after the rally itself, we provided protective accompaniment, which means that we escorted vulnerable community members home. This is a grid for building out an early warning, early response system. This is a step 3. Just know that after this training, you'll receive our threat assessment training that's connected to our early warning, early response training. But as you can see here, one early warning indicator that we used as an example is that there was an uptick in threats made by white supremacist groups against the community. And the early response was to alert everyone on the signal thread to activate safety teams. This is but one of many examples, and I invite you to think about your own early warning indicators and early response actions that would apply to your situation and your community. Some good practices around early warning, early response is to conduct a threat assessment and a capacity assessment to find out if you have similar mechanisms within your community. I know here in New York, there are groups like Ice Watch who will document when they see ICE raids happening and will inform community members who may be specifically at risk. And to identify the most secure form of communication for your early warning, early response system. This is really key. Once you set up your early warning indicators and your early responses, what is the mechanism in which you're going to communicate that out to the community? And your assignment for tonight or for this week is to practice using Signal, the encrypted messaging app, with your friends or family as a primary mode of communication. The next tool that we're going to be introducing is called the OODA loop. This is a crisis decision-making tool. It was initially formalized by the US military for fighter pilots to be able to utilize this if and when they lose oxygen and are in a situation where they need to be able to fall back onto something to be able to make real-time decisions. OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And as you can see, it's an ongoing loop. And I'll talk a little bit more about why it's important to continue until you're home safe. Content warning. I'll be showing state violence against protesters. This is footage that we took during the Dante Wright protests of April 2021 in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. And if the sound doesn't work, my apologies. Um, I just invite folks to just practice your observational skills. We're going to do this in a couple of rounds. So right now, just go ahead and take in the everything that you see in front of you. So what I'd like us to do together is to put ourselves in the shoes of being on a community safety team, monitoring and providing unarmed civilian protection for community members to be able to enact their human rights in a civic space. So The first part of the OODA loop is observe. When you're in observation mode, you're taking information around you and also within you. The questions that you want to ask yourself is what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? And also, what are you feeling? Utilize whichever observational tools you have at your disposal. The last question about what are you feeling is one that's really important. Our body has an amazing ability to take in massive amounts of information and then present them somatically. What that means is the information that we take on around us, especially in a crisis situation, could be extremely chaotic, yet our system is still able to identify both consciously and subconsciously potential threats. So if you've ever been to a situation like a party or an event or somewhere where all of a sudden you're feeling like your gut is telling you something's off. This feels really strange. This feels weird. I don't feel safe. That's your entire system translating information consciously and subconsciously, and then having your body respond to that. So I always invite people when they're practicing the OODA loop is to really take notice of what they're feeling. And right now I'm feeling like I need water, so excuse me. So as a safety team, the next step is that orientation or orienting. What is a baseline or what is normal for this situation? What would be an anomaly or something that sticks out? So I invite you to just take a very close look at the image in front of you. Take note, feel free to write it down or make a mental note. What is a baseline for this situation right now? And the baseline, once again, is what is quote unquote normal for this situation. And as you can see, there are protesters on one side of a chain link fence. And on the other side, there are multiple state security agencies in different forms of riot gear and uh, also holding different types of dispersal weapons. The baseline for this, if I were to take a look, is it seems pretty chill, pretty calm, um, if not a bit tense. You don't see any uh, fists that are up. You don't see any weapons being pointed at the protesters. Even the state security that are on top of the roof have their weapons down. So that's the baseline. And now I want you to imagine what the anomaly could possibly be. What would be something that sticks out? Excuse me. So once we go from observation and taking all of the information in to orienting, establishing the baseline, excuse me, we then go to deciding. So in decide, you want to think about what your mandate is. As a safety team, our goal was to get people out of the situation safely. In this image, I'm attending to two protesters that were shot with various dispersal weapons from pepper balls to beanbag rounds, which are essentially metal balls that are encapsulated within small fabric bag. Once we attended to their injuries, we were able to help them leave the location. There was also three young Black gentlemen who had attended the protest. And they had not forecasted that this would escalate. So they had parked past the police line. They came up to us and asked them, "Can you help us get to our cars? We don't feel safe. We feel afraid." So we created a protective bubble with our safety team around these three young gentlemen and walked them towards their cars. As soon as state security saw us, they recognized that we were a third-party organization focused on protection and allowed us to keep these three individuals safe. There was also one young lady who was quite pregnant and had also not realized that this was going to be such an escalated protest. And we ended up making sure that we created another protective bubble to get her out of that location and back to her home. So we went from observing, taking all the information in, orienting, looking at the baseline and identifying anomalies, to deciding, thinking about what our plan of action is. And our last step in the OODA loop is act. What do you need to do in this moment to keep yourself and others safe? Do it and go back to observe. In this image, myself and the members of the safety team escorted and supported this individual who had been injured by a dispersal weapon to be able to leave the location. Sorry. I'm going to show the video that we saw earlier, and I want you to put yourselves into the shoes of a safety team. Imagine that your mandate or your objective is to keep people safe. I want you to practice observing, orienting, deciding, and acting. What would you do in this situation? So now what I'd like us to do is just like take a moment to breathe. One thing I've learned in doing this work is our bodies can't tell the difference between a simulation and reality. So even if it is something that's happening virtually or something that may not pose an immediate or real threat, our body still experiences it as such. So let's take a moment and breathe. Recognize what's going on in your body. Are you tense? Are you anxious? Or you might be relaxed. Just take a moment to do a little scan. Now, when you're ready, I'd like to teach you a few observational skills um, using sight. So this comes from uh, having trained human rights observers and other monitors of uh, protest spaces. So the first one is practicing different forms of uh, different forms of visual assessment. So first, what you're going to do with me is I want to invite you to take a look at the folks that are closest to you on the screen, and then shift your gaze to those that are furthest from you. So closest to you, then furthest. Close, far. Now what I'd like you to do is we're going to scan from the left to the right, then back from the right to the left, and then one more time from left to right. Now I'd like to invite you, we're going to look from the, the floor to folks' heads. So take a look at the floor, take a look at folks' shoes, and then go up to their head level. What are the things that you notice that you may not have noticed before? Practicing some of these observational skills is really important in training your body to be able to then do this in a emergency or crisis situation. When you're able to identify potential threats visually, then you're able to then turn off your observation when you're home safe. So just make a mental note of the new things that you had seen in the second round. And one of the reasons you might be asking, why are you teaching us how to look at things? One of the reasons for this is to minimize observational fatigue. When you're on the ground as a part of a safety team, you could be on your, you could be observing for 12 to 18 hours sometimes. I remember when I was in Ferguson in 2014, and it was from dawn until well past midnight when we were out on the ground. And when you're not practicing mindful observation, a lot of potential dangers may arise that you're not keeping track of. So make sure that when you are utilizing the OODA loop or any form of situational awareness, you tell yourself to turn it on and then off. Once again, the OODA loop is a crisis decision-making tool. OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And the reason that we turn it on and off is to reinforce our agency and autonomy. When violence happens to us, we are momentarily deprived of that. So if we are observing for violence, it's important for us to consciously say, I'm turning it on and I'm turning it off. Otherwise, you can go into a state of hypervigilance where you're constantly scanning for threats when there are no threats. Some good practices around the OODA loop is, once again, turning it on and off. I always have to really press that point because there have been so many times when I or others have come back from a very intense protest, and we're still looking for potential threats. We can still hear the chants in our minds as if they were still happening. So this helps you to get back into a state of regulation where your body is no longer looking for threats on the horizon. You also want to practice it using in non-crisis situations. So the next time you go for a stroll or you're outside or you're somewhere relatively safe, tell yourself, I'm going to turn on my OODA loop I'm going to observe. I'm going to orient to figure out what the baseline and the anomalies are. I'm going to decide on what my plan of action can be, and then I'm going to act. I live in New York City, and one of the places I hate going is Times Square. I always have my OODA loop on in Times Square. So my goal in Times Square is to get out of there as quickly as possible. There are a million Elmos and all these random folks that are there, millions of tourists, and I just want to get from point A to point B. So I turn my OODA loop on and I'm constantly scanning. I'm trying to figure out what I need to do. Sometimes the sidewalk might be blocked off, so I need to readjust and figure out what my next plan of action is. And then once I'm home safe, I turn my OODA loop off. The last good practice is to practice, the last uh, thing is to practice the 5 beautiful things exercise. What this is essentially utilizing your observational skills to help you get back to a state of regulation where you're cool, calm, collected, and connected. This is part of our home safe protocol for safety teams. When you are home safe, I ask the team, everyone, to go around their apartment, their home, or wherever they feel safe, and to practice identifying 5 beautiful things that they may not have noticed before. That may be a letter from a loved one that you just realized was on your desk. That may be you walking by the mirror and realizing that your hair looks really good today. Whatever you would term as something beautiful would be part of this exercise. And once again, it's using those observational skills that are used to find threats instead to help you regulate. So your assignment for this week is the next time you are at the grocery store, practice using your OODA loop with the express intent of finding sales and getting out of the store as quickly as possible. That's what I do at Trader Joe's all the time. There's no sales, but I got to get my chia seeds and pecans. The next tool that I'll be introducing folks to is called pod mapping. Pod mapping was created by Mia Mingus and the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective in 2014. Mia Mingus is an amazing disabled API organizer, activist, and thought leader that developed this model for folks to use in times of violence or in times of emergency. This is a proactive planning tool that you and really anyone that you know can use to keep yourself and others safe. In this example, the pod map starts with you. So imagine yourself in the middle of this pod map, and everyone, and uh, the example here is Raquel Willis, a powerful, phenomenal Black trans organizer and author, is right in the middle. Raquel is trying to identify her pod for a potential protest that might be happening. So she thought about 3 people that may have skills or capacities that can help support her. You see LJ, you see Michael, and you see Sorsha right there. And they're all folks that have specific skills that can ensure that Raquel is safe and vice versa. A pod map is essentially a capacity map, understanding what your needs are and what your capacity or offerings are that you can share with others. In this moment, one of the calls to action is to build community. or to organize with community. And many folks may not have gone to a organizing training, or this might be the first time they've ever done that. So I invite you to really use this model to start building what community, very intentional community, can look like in times of crisis, disaster, or emergency. Your pod is made up of people that you would call on in violence, if violence, harm, or abuse happened to you, me and Minkus. So your pod aren't just your friends, but these are folks that are ride or die with you. These can be comrades, it can be family members. Uh, this pod map, very much like unarmed civilian protection, is grounded in relationships, the relationships you have with others and the relationships that they have with you. So I want to ask folks to think about who are the first three people that come to mind when you imagine your pod in an emergency, and what capacities do you need, and what can you offer them, and vice versa. So in this example, Raquel is a leader at a rally and needs a street medic. That's why Michael is there. Raquel also needs someone that could de-escalate the situation, which is where LJ is brought in. And lastly, Raquel needs um, an experienced bike protector to provide protection in the event of a need for folks to support the community while they're on their bikes. And that's Sorsha. And this can be used in a non-protest example as well. If you were to think about an emergency, like say a natural disaster, who are the first three people that come to mind that you know have capacities that you need, and also that you have capacities that they need? And capacities are strengths or resources that you can offer others. So let's do a wheelchair ramp of what you would want to put together for your pod map. So first, you want to write down a list of your needs and a list of your capacities. Then you want to draw a circle in the middle on a piece of paper with your name along with your needs and capacities. Next, you want to write down three people, so the folks that you thought of from earlier, who can support your needs and whom you can support, and connect them to you with a bold line. Now, you want to think of three more people who may not come up first and foremost, but three folks that are within your orbit, and you want to connect them with a dotted line. These are folks that may need more support to be prepared, or you have a relationship with them where you're trying to develop. So you want to turn the dotted lines into bold lines of folks that are ride or die, or folks that you can rely upon and that they can rely on you. And now you have the start of your pod map. So each circle should have a name, capacities needed, and capacities offered. Some good practices is organize a small get together to build out your pod map with your potential pod. Like invite some friends over, or have an outdoor picnic. It's difficult in the Northeast right now, but organize an event where folks are intentional about building this out. Be realistic about your capacities, or what are your offerings, what are your strengths. And remember, it's about quality over quantity. You want to have folks that you can rely on and not necessarily like a million people that you're going to have to manage those relationships. Your assignment for this week or for this evening is to use a pod mapping worksheet by Mia Mingus and the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective. If you have registered for this, you'll be receiving an email with all of these resources. And if you're seeing this online, please Google Mia Mingus pod mapping. The last tool that I'd like to introduce you to is called the Holistic Check-in. This is something that was developed with Black organizers in Ferguson, Missouri, after the murder of Michael Brown. The goal of a holistic check-in is to provide peer-to-peer support after or even during an emergency situation to help one understand what they're feeling holistically and what their specific care needs are. So the 4 questions are, what are you feeling physically right now? What are you feeling emotionally right now? What are you feeling energetically right now? And what does care or support look like for you right now? And you want to share as much as you possibly can based on trust once again. And this is all based on consent. You share what you can, but when I've used this in emergency situations, folks have shared, I am so stressed out that my period has stopped and I am very dehydrated. I need water. And right now, support looks like I need you to go get me some tampons because I can't leave the spot right now. So it's about reinforcing one's agency and autonomy and identifying their specific needs. Some good practices is to conduct a holistic check-in for yourself first, just to see how it feels. And before offering a holistic check-in, do a self-capacity check. What are 3 things you can offer right now? In a lot of situations where a disaster happens, people will very kindly, but sometimes well intentionally say, hey, what can I do to support you? Many times, survivors of violence may not have the capacity to identify that. So it's important to think about 3 things that you can offer right now. So, hey, do you need support? I can offer, can I Venmo you dinner? Can I hold space for you right now with a holistic check-in as we're doing? Can I share space with you and just make sure you're safe? So think about the capacities that you have to offer in that moment. And then lastly, remember this is not therapy, it's peer-to-peer support, and it's about reinforcing one's agency and autonomy. You're not giving a prescribed approach of what they should be doing. Rather, you're helping them to surface what their needs are and how they can support themselves. So your assignment is to practice using the holistic check-in the next time you have an informal chat with a friend, partner, or loved one. You can either do it one at a time or switch off in the questions. See what works best for you. Thank you all so much. We went through quite a lot in a short amount of time. I want to say this is barely touching on the surface of these tools, and Nonviolent Peaceforce has a library of trainings and capacity enhancement activities that we do with communities, organizations all over the US. And we hope that we can help support folks in keeping each other safe. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Anna Zaros. Who keeps us safe? We keep us safe.
Thank you so much, Kellyanne. Thank you for leading us through those tools. I know every time I hear them, been lucky enough to hear you teach them quite a few times now, but I always learn something new each time. So thank you. We do have a couple questions and probably just time for two. If something else comes up for you, please feel free to put it in the Q&A section and we will try to follow up afterwards and get back to you. But the first question is from Alexis. If you could explain a little bit more the difference between a mini bag and a get home bag, and what's the difference between that and an everyday backpacker purse?
Definitely. This is such an intelligent question asked by an absolutely brilliant, that's my niece. Alexis, hi. So what differentiates a get home bag from a backpack is the intent. It's also the contents. So when you're thinking about a everyday carry bag or your everyday backpack, you may not have a first aid kit in there, or you may not have um, water filters in there. So a get home or a go bag are primarily focused on getting you to another location safely, and it only has necessities. You want to make sure to limit what you have inside there. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you. That's so great. And then Kathleen has a question. If someone has an anxiety disorder, this may get in the way of the feelings aspect of observation. So for everyone, we're back at the OODA loop. Do you have recommendations for how to address this?
Yes, and Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing that. So I deal with PTSD from previous protective actions, from previous direct actions. And there are times when I will feel activated, and it's really important to know when you're feeling activated and to share that with your safety team. One of the things that we do as part of our process is to identify our activation points. So these are very specific things. There's sometimes called triggers that one may experience. And countering that, what are your anchor points? What are the things that can help ground you in the moment? So um, what I really try to help folks to do is to identify what their thresholds are. And not everyone needs to be quote unquote on the ground, right? Or if you are experiencing anxiety, being able to name that is a first step. When PTSD symptoms come up, I will tell my team, I'm starting to dissociate. I need to step away. I'm going to go have some water. Can you just watch me real quick? So when we have safety teams, we operate from the three C's: consent, communication, and care. I invite you to use those in your own work or in your everyday life, and to really make sure to communicate what your needs are throughout. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much. And Chanel has a question about the type of water filters that you use, if you could explain that again.
Yeah, sure. So this is not sponsored. I have to say it like an influencer. This is not sponsored.
We should try that though.
Yeah, I know, right? I was like, actually, if LifeStraw would like to, um, so I have a two different types of water filters. One is LifeStraw, which is a physical water filter that filters out up to 99% of, um, I believe, heavy metals, viruses, bacteria. And I also have a UV filter that's primarily focused on viruses. I would invite folks to think about what their resources are and what's possible. And there's a lot of tutorials and reviews on different types of water filters. One of the gold standards is the Berkey water filter, which is quite large and not as portable. But they are these different water filter companies are creating more portable water filters. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And then we have another question about how, so there's a question about the Indonesia context, and I will follow up with you about that because I would love to get the voices of our Indonesian colleagues to answer your question because they're more well placed for that. So we'll definitely follow up with you. And then there's a question about how and this will be our last one, how law enforcement responds to us and our safety teams.
Sure. In Minneapolis, one of the first steps is if we're going to be engaging in a protective action is to interface and to notify whichever law enforcement agency has jurisdiction to let them know, very similar to street medics or legal observers, to let them know that we're a third party organization. So I interfaced with the captain of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department and let them know like exactly what we're wearing, what our mandate was, the number of people that were going to be on our team, and shared my contact information if and when she might have any questions. So it's really, once again, as a nonpartisan organization, we take on the labor off of the community of having to interface with law enforcement or other security agencies.
Thank you. Thank you all for those great questions and for joining us tonight. We're really grateful to Kalyan for sharing your wisdom and experience. And again, big shout out and thank you to Vern and Cheryl and Jake for their interpretation. I really hope you all leave this hour feeling more equipped to stay safe and to extend that safety in your community. So we'd really love to stay in touch with you and continue to share resources. This is one, we think of this as part of an ongoing conversation with you. So you can definitely subscribe to our communications on our website, and we'll share that link in follow-up materials as well as the link to our training menu, if that's something you'd like to explore. And then a last share is that next week we'll be having an urgent briefing with our Global Policy and Advocacy Director and our Executive Director, unpacking the recent cuts to humanitarian funding, rise in violence against civilians, and an abandonment of humanitarian law and human rights. And so I invite you to join us to deepen your understanding of this current moment and how you can play a role in advocating for safety, peace, and human rights. So we will share that link out as well. So again, we're here as a resource to you and to be in touch and to keep each other safe. So thank you again. Have a great night.